The Pet Parade. The Grand Hall of Virulk's station shimmered with the sterile polish of intergalactic commerce. Creatures from every edge of the known universe paraded their pets under towering, crystalline arches. Slithering serpents from nebulan marshes, plasma-coated drift cats, even a psychic balloon beast from Rigel. 4. Each flaunted as a token of power, prestige, or wealth. Among them strode Gorvik, a Zaltari merchant, his mandibles clicking in smug satisfaction. 8 feet of gleaming chitin and silk robes, he turned heads, not for his status, but for what walked behind him. A human, clad in a simple tunic and steel collar. The man was lean, muscled, and silent. His eyes, ice blue and unervingly calm, swept the room with quiet assessment. His name, though rarely used aloud, was Mason. Trailing beside him was something far less imposing. A small earth creature known as a dog. It was no larger than a Zaltari's forearm, with scruffy brown fur and bright, watchful eyes. A tag on its collar read Baxter. "Is that it?" scoffed a bulbous-skinned Trevorian noble, puffing at a vapor pipe. "That's the human you've been bragging about, Gorvik. It doesn't even snarl. He does as he's told," Gorvik replied, stroking the ridges of his chin. "No teeth, no tantrums. Unlike your yowling sun-ape." The Trevorian's beast howled in protest, slapping its handler with a foot-long tongue. A chorus of laughter rippled through the gathered aliens. "Humans," chuckled a Varkeen warlord, his hide layered in jagged black scales. "I never understood the appeal. Too soft. No horns, no venom sacs. Barely even furred." Gorvik waved a claw dismissively. "They don't need any of that. Humans adapt, obey, and they bond quickly. Emotionally fragile, but incredibly loyal. You beat them once or twice, and they remember their place." He turned to Mason. "Sit." Mason sat, smoothly, silently. No sign of resistance. "Fetch," Gorvik added, tossing a small metal ring. Mason stood, walked across the platform, retrieved the ring, and handed it back without eye contact. Murmurs of interest stirred. A few data pads were raised. Credits exchanged hands. "He's well-trained," admitted a feathered trader. "But what's that other thing?" "A companion animal," Gorvik said, glancing at Baxter. "Apparently, they're emotionally codependent. I keep it around to keep the human calm." Baxter sat next to Mason, tail twitching. His ears perked at the laughter echoing around him. "Companion?" The Varkeen grinned, revealing serrated fangs. "It's a chew toy." With a sudden swipe, the Varkeen raised his booted foot, intending to punt the little dog across the chamber. He never got the chance. Before the foot landed, Mason was between them. He hadn't moved like a pet. He moved like a soldier. His forearm caught the Varkeen's shin mid-swing. Not hard enough to break bone, but enough to stop the motion cold. He didn't strike back, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, eyes locked onto the warlord. "Don't," Mason said evenly. "Touch." The dog. The room went quiet. Gorvik's mandibles twitched in disbelief. "Mason down." Mason didn't budge. Baxter let out a low, warning growl, not loud but primal. A sound evolved for dark forests and hidden dens. "Forgive him," Gorvik said hastily. "It's the bonding reflex. They sometimes forget. He struck me." The Varkeen snarled, looming over Mason. "Your pet attacked me." Mason's hand clenched slowly at his side. "He stopped you from hurting something innocent," he replied. "I call that restraint." "Restraint," the warlord spat. "You forget your place, mammal." The growl from Baxter grew louder, almost vibrating through the floor. "Mason," Gorvik hissed. "Heel." "Now." Mason stepped back, slow and smooth. Baxter followed. The moment passed, but tension lingered in the air like ozone before a storm. "Interesting," murmured one of the observers, tapping notes into their datapad. "Very interesting." As Gorvik led Mason and Baxter away, his eyes burned with warning. "You embarrass me again," he whispered, "and I'll have the dog spaced." Mason said nothing, but Baxter's ears twitched, and he glanced up at his human, eyes narrowing in a way no one noticed. Except Mason. Broken leashes. The back quarters of Gorvik's merchant vessel were cramped and cold, lit by flickering blue lights that buzzed with poor maintenance. Mason sat on the steel floor, one arm resting on his knee. Baxter curled beside him, head on his paw, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. They'd been confined here for hours, punishment for the incident at the pet parade. Gorvik had stormed out in embarrassment, growling threats and snapping his mandibles, too furious to even strike Mason in public. But here, behind closed doors, the Zaltari's rage was unfiltered. "You will learn obedience, human," Gorvik hissed now, pacing in front of Mason. "I pay good credits for you. You are property. You do not correct a superior, let alone a war noble." Mason didn't flinch. His face remained calm, but his knuckles whitened slightly. "You kicked a dog. You tried to kick a dog," Mason corrected. "There's a difference." Gorvik's arm struck like a whip. The back of his clawed hand snapped across Mason's cheek, opening a shallow cut just below his eye. Blood ran down his face, slow and vivid against pale skin. Baxter jerked upright with a sharp bark. "Back!" Gorvik roared. "Or you'll be the next one bleeding, mutt." Baxter didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He didn't make a sound. He just stared. His ears were rigid, body still, muscles coiled in silence. His eyes, once warm and eager, were now cold and fixed. Calculating. Mason reached out gently, touching Baxter's head. The dog blinked, relaxing only slightly. "We're fine," Mason whispered. "Not yet," Gorvik sneered. "You talk to it like it understands." "He does." Another bark echoed from the hallway, a Varkeen signal tone. Gorvik turned to the door, exoskeletal fingers tightening. "That'll be Lord Rocker," he muttered. "I told him I'd arrange a viewing. He's interested in acquiring you." Mason rose slowly to his feet, the blood on his cheek still fresh. "I'm not for sale. You don't have a say," Gorvik snapped, storming out. As the door hissed shut behind him, Mason exhaled and knelt beside Baxter. He spoke low, voice clipped and steady. "Protocol check." Baxter let out a soft chuff in response. "Status." Another short chuff. "Engagement." A pause, then nothing. Mason smiled faintly, still holding back. "Good boy." Lord Rocker loomed in the viewing room, tall, black-scaled, armored in bone. The Varkeen noble regarded Mason with a predator's curiosity. "Show me what it can do," he said to Gorvik. Mason was ushered into a small arena, circular and bare. The surrounding aliens leaned forward, some with amusement, others with anticipation. "Perform," Gorvik ordered. Mason didn't move. Gorvik's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Now." Still nothing. The silence drew murmurs from the crowd. Gorvik gestured angrily. "Do the spin, or the bow. The one with the handstand." Mason looked at him. "Calm. Flat. No." Gorvik reached for his prod. Before he could touch it, Baxter padded into the arena. No one had opened the gate for him. He must have slipped in during the commotion. The room chuckled. "What's this?" One alien laughed. "The real performer has arrived." Gorvik snarled. "Get that flea-ridden thing out of." Baxter growled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was pure warning. Rocker's eyes narrowed. "Wait. Let's see." Gorvik hesitated, hand trembling over the prod. Baxter positioned himself directly between Gorvik and Mason, legs planted, hackles raised. "Get it to sit," Gorvik hissed to Mason. "He's not your pet," Mason said quietly. "He's mine." Gasps echoed through the room. Rocker tilted his head. "Interesting bond. Can it fight?" "He doesn't fight unless I'm in danger." Rocker smiled. "Then let's test that." The Varkeen drew a blade from his hip, a short, curved fong knife, and flicked it toward Mason's feet. Not a strike, not quite, but enough. Baxter moved. In a blur of motion, he darted across the floor, landing between Mason and Rocker with his teeth bared and eyes locked on the noble. His stance said everything. Another inch, and I go for the throat. The crowd fell silent. Rocker's smile faded. "What is that thing?" someone whispered. "A soldier," Mason said, brushing a hand over Baxter's back. "And he's not the one on a leash." Teeth and fire. The alarms didn't start until after the blood hit the floor. It happened so fast, most of the audience didn't see it clearly. 1 second, Gorvik was shouting at Mason to submit, prodding him with a voltage rod. The next, Baxter was airborne. Nothing but a blur of fur, fangs, and fury. The rod never touched Mason. Baxter hit Gorvik square in the throat with the force of a missile, knocking the 8-foot insectoid back into the arena wall. The Zaltari let out a strangled screech, hands clawing at the tiny creature latched to his neck. Screams echoed through the viewing gallery. Spectators surged to their feet. Security alerts chirped in multiple dialects. Baxter didn't kill. He disabled, deliberate, surgical. Teeth found the soft membrane under Gorvik's jaw, where his nerve cluster was exposed. The shock rod fell from his clawed hands, clattering to the floor. By the moons, someone gasped. It's trained for combat. No, Rocker muttered, eyes wide. It's engineered. Mason didn't move from where he stood. His face was unreadable. His eyes, though, were sharp and alive. Bax, he said quietly. At once, the dog released his grip. Gorvik collapsed in a twitching heap, coughing and sputtering. Baxter landed nimbly, hackles still up, positioning himself once again between Mason and any threat. Station security burst into the room. Half a dozen armored enforcers with plasma restraints and stun halberds. Down, one barked. Restrain the animals. Mason raised a hand. Don't. Restrain them. The first enforcer lunged. Baxter met him with impossible speed. The little dog dodged the swing, spun behind the guard, and bit down on the pressure point just above the ankle joint. With a cry, the enforcer dropped like a stone, legs locking uselessly. A second came in swinging. Baxter darted beneath the arc of the weapon, leapt off the fallen enforcer's chest, and collided with the second's visor. The helmet cracked. The alien fell hard. Two more advanced, flanking. Mason finally moved. He stepped forward, not running, not panicked, just present, and put a hand on Baxter's back. Stand down, he said calmly. Baxter froze, muscles tight, teeth still bared. Not a threat anymore. You did good. Slowly, Baxter's body uncoiled. He lowered his head, ears flicking back. The enforcers hesitated, watching the dog retreat a step. He's listening, one muttered. That's not a pet, another said. That's a weapon. No, Mason corrected, voice like steel. He's a partner. They didn't know what to do. Protocol wasn't built for this. A small animal had just neutralized 3 armored guards with 0 fatalities. No chaos. No bloodlust. Just precision. Explain, Rocker demanded, stepping forward. That creature, what is it? Mason wiped a smear of blood from his cheek, leaving a red streak across his collar. Military working dog. Earthbred. Combat support trained. Modified for neurological trauma detection and defensive intervention. Meaning, Rocker asked. He knows when I'm in danger, Mason said. And he does what I can't. Rocker looked at Baxter with something close to reverence. So, it's a protector? It's more than that, Mason said. He's my last surviving squad mate. The silence that followed was heavy. No one laughed now. No one mocked. Rocker approached, slow and cautious. He knelt, something unheard of among Varkeen nobility, and extended a hand. Baxter watched. Then, after a beat, he allowed the noble to touch his head. I misjudged you, Rocker said to Mason. All of you. Mason shrugged. Everyone does. An enforcer opened his mouth, likely to bark more orders, but Rocker silenced him with a raised hand. No chains. No cages, he said firmly. This is not a pet. This is a bonded soldier. Under Varkeen law, he is protected. Gorvik groaned from the floor, still trying to sit up. Rocker turned to him, voice a quiet growl. And you assaulted a soldier under my protection. You don't understand, Gorvik coughed. He's a human. Yes, Rocker said, standing tall. And now, I finally understand what that means. Loyalty is not leashed. The medics carried Gorvik out on a hover stretcher, still twitching from Baxter's nerve clamp. Around him, the shattered remains of the arena echoed with a new kind of silence. One not of mockery, but of respect. Mason stood in the center of it all, Baxter calmly seated at his side. The dog's eyes scanned the room, but his body language had changed. The tension was gone. His job was done. No one dared call him a pet now. Lord Rocker broke the silence first. You said he was your last squad mate. What happened? Mason looked up, voice flat. What happens to most human squads in alien wars? We were useful, but expendable. We fought proxy battles for noble houses who saw us as tools. I watched them all fall, some in the field, some in cages. And the dog, he saved my life. Twice. Even pulled me out of a collapsed tunnel with a shattered leg. After that, I stopped calling him a combat asset and started calling him Bax. Rocker nodded slowly. And Gorvik purchased you afterward? Bought me from a failing mercenary outfit that used ex-soldiers like rental weapons. Didn't even want Bax at first. Thought he was a maintenance creature. I told him the dog came with me, or I wasn't worth the price. You should have cost 1,000 times more, Rocker muttered. Mason gave a wry smile. Didn't say I told him the truth. The station enforcers stood awkwardly at the edge of the arena, waiting for orders. Some still held restraints. None looked eager to try using them. Rocker gestured for them to stand down. There's no protocol for this, one said. We've never had a situation where a registered pet qualifies for sentient military defense classification. Then change your protocol, Rocker said, eyes locked on Baxter. Because that's not a pet. That's a guardian. The alien crowd murmured, some nodding, others clearly unsettled. You'll have enemies after this, Mason said. Gorvik's clients. Others who saw me as property. You're protecting a liability. Rocker smiled darkly. The Varkeen do not fear enemies. We collect them like trophies. You're not worried about being seen defending humans? I'm not defending a human, Rocker said. I'm honoring a soldier. And any empire that fails to see the difference deserves what's coming. A console on the wall lit up, station command requesting status. Rocker glanced at it, then at Mason. Do you want out? Mason raised a brow. Out of what? This. The collar. The leash. The titles. I can grant you sovereign status under my banner. Both of you. Mason looked down at Baxter, who wagged his tail once, sensing something shift. Then, with slow fingers, Mason reached up and unlatched the steel collar from his neck. It dropped to the floor with a hollow, final clang. Yeah, he said. We're out. Later, in the docking bay, Mason stood beside a newly charged transport, courtesy of Rocker's personal hangar. No guards, no escort, just an open path and full autonomy. Baxter sniffed around the entrance ramp, then sat expectantly. Any place in mind? Rocker asked. Somewhere quiet, Mason said. A planet with wind and trees. Somewhere Bax can run. You'll have safe passage in Varkeen space. I've sent the order personally. Mason turned, eyes serious. Why are you really doing this? Rocker considered his answer. Because I've seen many weapons, many soldiers, but I've never seen loyalty like that. He stood between you and a dozen threats without hesitation. That kind of bond, it's sacred. Mason nodded once. It is. Rocker extended his hand, not as a noble, but as a warrior. Mason shook it. If we meet again, I hope it's not on a battlefield. Then stay free, Mason. Both of you. Baxter barked once, tail flicking. A farewell. As the ship's engines warmed and the loading ramp lifted, Mason and Baxter stood side by side in the cabin, looking out at the station one last time. Once, it had been a prison. Now it was just another point on the map. The stars stretched out before them, cold, endless, and open. And whatever came next, they'd face it together.